Around a month ago, I made a video giving you guys my first impressions on all 32 NHL teams, with us now being at basically the quarter mark of the season, which is just insane to say. It feels like the season just started. I wanted to make an updated version of that video, give you guys my thoughts on all 32 NHL teams at this point in the season. I really enjoy making these kinds of videos, obviously talking about all 32 teams. There's a little bit in here for everybody, and I plan on making another one of these around the halfway mark, and then another towards the end of the season. So if that's something that you guys want to see, let me know down below. In the most recent video, I did something that I usually never do on the channel, and that is ask for a like goal, because I just don't think it makes sense to ask at the beginning of a video, but you can't argue with results. I asked you guys to hit 1,000 likes, and we're well over 2,000 likes on that Deal or No Deal video, which is the most likes I've gotten on a video in a long time. So let's see if we can hit 1,000 likes on this video as well. That way it'll let me know that you guys want to see more videos like this where we cover all 32 NHL teams in the future. And lastly, if this is your first time checking out the channel and you want NHL content just like this all year round, hit that subscribe button. We're getting super close to 75,000. And with all that being said, let's go ahead and start off in reverse alphabetical order, switching it up from the last video like this. Let's start out with the Winnipeg Jets, who are in a pretty good position right now. They currently occupy the third divisional seed in the Central, and despite a tough loss last night to the Nashville Predators, they're playing really well lately, 8-2 in their last 10. They're getting really well-balanced production throughout the lineup. Guys like Niederreiter, Appleton, Iafallo, Perfetti have provided the Jets with some great secondary scoring thus far, and the Jets are in this position without Connor Hellebuyck playing like a Vezina candidate. He hasn't been bad by any means, but we know Hellebuyck can be a lot better, and when he's at his best, he's amongst the best goaltenders in the league, so Winnipeg Jets fans have to be pretty happy with where the team is at right now. The Washington Capitals are up next, and this is a team that's definitely surprised me so far. I sort of wrote off the Washington Capitals heading into the season. I didn't view them as a legit threat to make the playoffs in what I expected to be a very tough Metro division, but here we are at around the quarter mark of the season, and the Capitals are just 2 points back of the Hurricanes for second in the Metro and have 3 games in hand. For this to be sustainable, Washington's offense is going to have to pick it up. Goals have been hard to come by. The power play has been terrible. Ovechkin leads the team with just 12 points, which is the lowest point total by a player who leads their team in scoring this season. Luckily for the Capitals, the defense has been real solid, and they've been getting great goaltending recently from Charlie Lindgren, who's kind of making a push to steal the starting role from Darcy Kemper. Despite all the offensive struggles, the Capitals have to be happy with where they're at in the standings right now. I'd be lying if I said I didn't have my doubts on if they're going to be able to sustain this across a full 82-game season, especially considering the fact that there are teams behind Washington right now like New Jersey and like Pittsburgh, who I don't think anybody expects to finish the season behind them. Next up, we have the Vegas Golden Knights, who have definitely cooled off as of late after their torrid start to the season, but they still banked enough points early on in the season as to where they still find themselves first place in the Pacific Division with 30 points in 21 games. Really not a whole lot to break down when it comes to the Vegas Golden Knights. They are the defending Stanley Cup champions, and they look like Stanley Cup contenders again this season. You have one of the absolute best goaltending tandems in the league with Aiden Hill and Logan Thompson. For the most part this season, they've been getting big time production from all of their top guys. This Vegas team is honestly good enough as to where they can just coast for the majority of the regular season. In my opinion, their season really doesn't start until April. Moving on now, we have the Vancouver Canucks, another team in the Pacific like Vegas who have cooled off as of late, just 5-5 in their last 10. This is something we all kind of expected to happen. I mean, with the way Vancouver was scoring goals and winning games to start the season, we all knew it probably wasn't sustainable, but getting off to an amazing start to the season like the Vancouver Canucks did, it allows you to go through lulls and not have it completely derail your season. They're still sitting pretty, third place in the Pacific Division, just 1 point back of Vegas for first, but Vegas does have a game in hand. The Canucks could honestly play just a little bit above average for the remainder of the season and still easily make the playoffs, especially when you consider how the rest of the Pacific Division is looking aside from those top 3 teams, and really the rest of the Western Conference. I mean, Seattle currently occupies the second wildcard spot, and they're under 500. The Toronto Maple Leafs are up next. They currently sit 5th place in the Atlantic Division. They occupy the second wildcard spot in the Eastern Conference. It's been a little bit of an up and down season for the Maple Leafs. I would say overall they have been inconsistent. They've had some pretty glaring defensive issues so far this season and goaltending issues as well, specifically Ilya Samsonov. I mean, Joseph Woll has basically already taken over as the Maple Leafs starter, but this is a roster that has enough top-end talent, that has enough offensive firepower as to where they're going to be able to outscore the majority of their defensive issues. I would say the general consensus is the Leafs have been pretty underwhelming to start the season, and yet they're still 4 games over 500. They still occupy a playoff spot, which is pretty telling. The Tampa Bay Lightning are up next. They currently sit 4th place in the Atlantic, occupy the first wildcard spot in the Eastern Conference. They just got Andrei Vasilevsky back from injury, and for me heading into the season, their year really weighed on how they were going to fare to start the season without their ace in net. As we know now, the Lightning were able to stay afloat, and overall I think the organization has to be thrilled with the way Jonas Johansson carried himself and was able to perform while carrying a heavy workload with Andrei Vasilevskiy out. Now you get Vasilevskiy back, already occupying a playoff spot. You got Kucherov playing like an absolute madman. The Tampa Bay Lightning are in a really good place right now. Moving along now, we have the St. Louis Blues, and similar to what I said about the Washington Capitals, this is another team that's really surprised me to start the season. I wrote them off heading into the year. I didn't view them as a team that had a legit shot to make the playoffs, and they currently occupy the first wildcard spot in the Western Conference. They're 11-8-1. They definitely have benefited from a large part of the Western Conference being extremely underwhelming throughout the first quarter of the season. At this point, I don't think it's too far-fetched to believe that the St. Louis Blues could actually sustain this and make the playoffs as one of those two wildcard spots in the Western Conference. I mean, it's not like many of the teams chasing the St. Louis Blues in the standings are really lighting the world on fire. The Seattle Kraken are up next, definitely a massive step back this season from their 100-point campaign last year. That being said, despite the fact that they're under 500, like I mentioned earlier in the video, they currently occupy a playoff spot. The Kraken have been playing better recently with just one regulation loss in their last 5. This is a team that I'm expecting to remain in the playoff hunt all season long, but unless one of Decord or Grubauer step up and give the Kraken consistently solid goaltending, I have my doubts on if they're actually going to be able to make the playoffs. The San Jose Sharks are up next. Big improvement from the last time I made a video like this around a month ago. They've won 4 games since then. However, they still find themselves 8th place in the Pacific, 32nd in the league, and 32nd in goals for per game, 32nd in goals against per game. The San Jose Sharks still suck. They're likely going to finish with the best odds at the first overall draft pick, but they have definitely slowly started to creep out of that conversation for being one of the worst NHL teams of all time, which is a good thing. Moving along now, next up we have the Pittsburgh Penguins, a team that's still looking to find that consistency. They're 10-10 at an even 500, 6th place in the Metro. I think it's safe to say they probably deserve a little bit better of a record right now considering how they've played. I mean, you look at the fact that they're 19th overall in the NHL right now, and yet they have a plus 11 goal differential, and yet a team like the Seattle Kraken, currently above the Penguins in the league-wide standings, they have a minus 16 goal differential. The Islanders have a minus 10. They're also ahead of Pittsburgh. I feel like over the last 2 weeks especially, the Penguins are definitely on the right track, and if maybe they had a couple OT losses, a few more loser points than just having 10 regulation losses, the narrative around the team would be a little bit different right now. Next up, we have the Philadelphia Flyers. I will admit they've been able to sustain this play to start the season a lot longer than I thought they would. They're still over 500, 11-9-1, 3rd place in the Metro. John Tortorella's got these guys competing. He has that entire locker room bought in. I'm still not convinced that there's enough talent on this roster to stay ahead of teams like Pittsburgh and like New Jersey in the playoff race across a full 82-game season. I hope I'm wrong though. I'd like to see the Flyers prove me wrong and keep this up throughout the course of the season because it throws a wrench into things and makes the playoff race in the Metro a lot more interesting. The Metro was one of those divisions heading into the year that for most people was looked at as pretty predictable, and we all figured that the top 3 would be some combination of the Rangers, Hurricanes, and Devils, but so far that's been anything but the case. Next up, we have the Ottawa Senators, who have definitely been a pretty disappointing team so far this season. They're just 8-8, 16 points, currently sit last place in the Atlantic Division. The offense has been great, which, I mean, we all kind of expected. You look at this team's top 9 when healthy, it's one of the best top 9s in the league, but the defense hasn't been good enough. The goaltending's been meh, and they've definitely had some bad luck as well. Obviously, losing Thomas Chabot for as long as they're going to be without him is devastating. Ridley Gregg, before he went down with injury, I thought he was one of the better rookies in the league. There's not a lot of room for error at all in an Atlantic Division that is just a bloodbath right now. It's pretty telling that Ottawa is at 500 with a record of 8-8, but are in last place. The New York Rangers are up next. This team is an absolute wagon, 15-3-1, 1st place in the Metro, and actually 1st place overall in the entire league. The fact they've been able to maintain this pace without Adam Fox in the lineup over the last 9 games is insane. This team is clicking on all cylinders right now. You got both goaltenders playing incredibly well. Artemi Panarin playing like this team is clicking on all cylinders right now. You got both goaltenders performing really well. Artemi Panarin's playing like a legit Hart Trophy candidate with 29 points in 19 games. Eric Gustafsson has proved to be one of the biggest steals of the entire offseason. You get Alexis Lafreniere finally taking that next step and seemingly well on his way to having a breakthrough season. Not much to complain about if you're a Rangers fan right now. The New York Islanders, on the other hand, are I feel like really what everybody expected them to be. The goals are hard to come by. They play a stingy style of hockey, defense first. They get great goaltending. Is the goaltending and defense going to be enough to carry them to the playoffs? It's really same old when it comes to the Islanders. The goal for the Islanders, I feel like, is to just remain in the playoff hunt all season long, hopefully squeak in, and then once they get there, that's when they can make some noise. Obviously, this is a team that we've seen in the past go on some pretty crazy playoff runs. This is a team built for the playoffs and have proved to be a tough out in recent years. Next up, we have the New Jersey Devils. Definitely one of the more disappointing teams in the NHL thus far. Just 9-1, 7th place in the Metro. They have not looked good since Jack Hughes has went down. Goaltending has been a big concern for the Devils early on this season. Neither Vitek Vanacek or Akira Schmid have consistently been able to give them good performances in net, and you have to wonder, how long are the Devils going to let this thing play out? How long are they going to give Vitek Vanacek and Akira Schmid to find their game before going out and exploring the trade market and look to add a goaltender? No matter how good the offense is, no matter how good the power play is, that can only take you so far if you can't get a save. Just ask the Oilers. Next up, we have the Nashville Predators, who are one of the hottest teams in the league right now. Winners of 5 straight, a total record of 10-10 on the season, 5th in the Central. Off-season additions like Ryan O'Reilly and Gustav Nyquist have paid dividends for the Nashville Predators thus far. Both of those guys are producing really well. O'Reilly 18 points in 20 games, Nyquist with 15. If you told me that through 20 games, UC Saros was going to be one of the worst starting goaltenders in the league for the Nashville Predators, I would have thought that through those 20 games, Nashville is probably in the very basement of the NHL. So considering the fact that Saros has played as poorly as he has through 20 games, and yet Nashville is at an even 500, 10-10, just 1 point behind the Kraken for that second wildcard spot, I think if you're a Nashville fan, you take that. The Montreal Canadiens are up next, and they've cooled off over these last couple of weeks. They currently sit 7th place in the Atlantic Division. Jake Allen, after his torrid start to the season, has really came back down to earth, and let's be real, I don't think anybody expected Montreal to be a legit threat to make the playoffs this season, so their start to the season was a bit of a surprise, but overall, I still think there has been a lot of positive takeaways for the Montreal Canadiens throughout the first quarter of the season. Moving along now, next up we have the Minnesota Wild, and for the Wild, I think we're at that point in the season where it's no longer just a slow start. This team may just be bad. The Wild are 5-10-4, just 14 points, 7th place in the Central. The defense hasn't been good. They can't get a save when it matters. The offense, which was actually really hot to start the season, has cooled down, and they now rank 20th in goals for per game. Kirill Kaprizov looks like a shell of the player that he's been the last few seasons. If the Wild don't go on a run and turn things around here soon, this season is going to quickly become a write-off. Going from one extreme to the next up we have the Los Angeles Kings, who are an absolute wagon. They are winners of 5 straight, currently sit 2nd place in the Pacific Division, but just 1 point back of Vegas for first with 2 games in hand. Really difficult to point out any flaws when it comes to this Los Angeles Kings team so far this season. They don't really have a guy that's, producing up there amongst the league leaders in points or goals, but the offense is just so well balanced. All 4 lines are producing. You get 9 guys on the roster with double digits or more in points, and my biggest concern for the Los Angeles Kings heading into the season was the goaltending situation. How would they fare with a Cam Talbot Phoenix Copley tandem? In my season standings prediction video, I literally said it's difficult to view a team with those two as your 1-2 punch in net as a Stanley Cup contender, but here we are. Cam Talbot has 10 wins through his first 14 starts with a .931 save percentage. He's been one of the better starters in the league. Moving along now, next up we have the Florida Panthers, who are currently 12-7-1, 25 points, 2nd in the Atlantic Division, and kind of like how my biggest concern for the Kings coming into this season was their goaltending, and I've been proven wrong. My biggest concern for the Panthers heading into this season was their blue line and how they were going to start the season without Ekblad and Montour, and once again, I've been proven wrong. The Florida Panthers defense is the biggest reason why they currently sit 2nd place in the Atlantic Division. They currently rank 3rd in the entire league at 5-on-5 in expected goals against per 60 at just 2.17. I think you have to give a lot of credit to some of the new faces they brought in the offseason, guys like Oliver Ekman-Larsson, Nico Mikula, and Dmitry Kulikov. Those guys really held it down, and now you have the likes of Ekblad and Montour back in the lineup, and they're slowly starting to get back into the swing of things, and now all of a sudden the blue line, which again was my biggest concern about the Panthers heading into the season, is basically at full strength and looks fantastic. Next up we have the Edmonton Oilers. not going to beat a dead horse here. We all know the disappointing start to the season that the Oilers have had, but they have won 2 straight. McDavid has 9 points in his last 2 games, which is just silly. Is this the start of a run that is going to turn their season around? I guess we'll just have to wait and see, and I don't really think there's anything else to say about the Oilers that hasn't been said yet. Next up, we have the Detroit Red Wings. After a really rough trip to Sweden, getting just one of a possible 4 points against divisional rivals in the Ottawa Senators and the Toronto Maple Leafs, but since returning from Sweden, the Red Wings have bounced back in a big way. They are winners of 3 straight, including one massive road win over the Boston Bruins in regulation. The Red Wings currently have a record of 11-6-3, 3rd place in the Atlantic Division, and to be honest, I feel a lot better about where the team is at right now, even than I did after they started the season 5-1, because through those first 6 games, I feel like we all knew the way they were winning probably wasn't sustainable. You had DeBrincat and Larkin scoring at a 2-point per game pace. You had the power play lighting it up for, 4 or 5 goals a game on some nights. That just was not going to keep happening. But the way they've won over these last 3 is a sustainable way of winning. They're getting well-balanced production from up and down the lineup. They're not just relying on their power play. They're not just relying on their top line. They are playing a very strong and complete style of game. Alex Lyon has looked good. He's finally gotten into some games and has 2 wins through his first 3 starts. Really can't say enough just how important this recent stretch of play has been for Detroit after I feel like the season was kind of at an all-time low for Red Wings fans after they blew those 2 games in Sweden the way they did. Next up, we have the Dallas Stars, who have been really solid through their first 19 games. 2nd place in the Central, just 2 points back of the Colorado Avalanche for first with the game in hand. This Dallas team is just so incredibly well-balanced. Matt Duchene proving to be one of the biggest steals of the offseason. Joe Pavelski just forgot how to age at 39 years old. He currently leads Dallas with 19 points in 19 games. Wyatt Johnston has taken a big step in his sophomore season, and yet I feel like the best is still yet to come from the Dallas Stars. Jason Robertson has yet to hit the level he was playing at last season. I think we all know Jake Ottinger can hit another gear as well. The Dallas Stars are definitely in fantastic shape. Next up, we have the Columbus Blue Jackets, 6-12-4, 16 points, dead last in the Metro Division. It's been a rough year for the Blue Jackets after I feel like the expectation, at least internally, was that this team would be competing for a playoff spot based off the moves they made in the offseason, bringing in the likes of Damon Severson and Ivan Provorov, also getting Zach Werenski back healthy, obviously adding Adam Fantilli with that 3rd overall pick, but things definitely have not gone according to plan for the Columbus Blue Jackets. There's a lot of guys on this team that are just underachieving. Johnny Gaudreau with just 11 points in 22 games. Patrick Laine in 12 games. He's just got 3 goals and 4 points. He was the healthy scratch. These are the 2 highest paid forwards on the team, and I feel like the Blue Jackets are going to go as far as these 2 take them, and they just haven't been good enough to start the season. I really feel like this Blue Jackets team needs a big shakeup, and the longer they continue to underperform like this, I think the closer and closer we get to them, potentially making a big move and shaking the roster up. Next up, we have the Colorado Avalanche, who are currently 1st place in the Central Division with a record of 14-6. Offensively, this team has been dynamite, led by Cale Makar with 30 points in 20 games, not only playing like a Norris candidate, playing like a Hart Trophy candidate. When it comes to the goaltending, it's been kind of a tale of 2 seasons for Alexander Georgiev. He started unreal, has really cooled down. Ivan Prospatov, I feel like over these last couple starts for him, he's proven that he's at least capable of playing here and there and taking some pressure off Georgiev. I mean, I feel like they overplayed Georgiev to start the season, which could have played a big role in him cooling off as quick as he did. All in all, I feel like the Avs do have to feel pretty good about where they're at right now. Next up, we have the Chicago Blackhawks. Not really a whole lot to break down here. This team stinks. They're 6-13, 8th place in the Central. The only reason to be watching the Blackhawks, if you're not a Hawks fan, is to see Connor Bedard, who's been great. He's up to 10 goals and 17 points on the season. He doesn't have superpowers though, so no matter how good Connor Bedard does in his rookie season, it's not going to translate to many wins for this Blackhawks team. And with the news of Taylor Hall being sidelined for the remainder of the season, Corey Perry being out of the lineup for kind of an undisclosed reason, Athanasiou is out of the lineup right now. From here on out, wins could get even more hard to come by for the Blackhawks. The Carolina Hurricanes are up next. They currently have a record of 12 wins, 8 losses, 2nd place in the Metro. Overall, I feel like they really haven't been able to get going yet this season and be the juggernaut that we know they can be. They've been getting some of the worst goaltending in the league, whether it's been Ronta, Freddie Anderson, or Kochetkov. I don't expect that to keep up. I think it's safe to assume that at least one of those guys are going to get going at some point. The Hurricanes did just recently get Andrei Svechnikov back in the lineup. He scored a goal in his return in their most recent win over the Blue Jackets. I think it's really only a matter of time before this Hurricanes team really starts to heat up. Next up, we have the Calgary Flames, who are 8-10-3, 5th 5th place in the Pacific Division. If you've been subscribed to the channel, even just the last couple of months, you probably know where I stand on the Calgary Flames. I think it's time for them to head in a different direction. I'm really hoping that they move guys like Lindholm and Hanifin as opposed to giving them extensions. Are they completely out of the playoff race at this point? No, of course not. They're just 2 wins away from being back at 500, but I think it's really clear that this core is just not a core that's going to be able to be a legit contender. And if they do bring back the likes of Hanifin and Lindholm as opposed to trading those guys and kind of kickstarting a retool, adding future assets, I think this team is just going to be mediocre for a long time and kind of stuck in no man's land, which is probably the worst place to be stuck if you're an NHL team. At least if you're at the bottom of the league consistently, you're getting top draft picks. Moving on now, next up we have the Buffalo Sabres. Really underwhelming first quarter of the season for them. They're just 9-10-2, 6th place in the Atlantic Division. They've struggled offensively this season. They ranked 25th in goals for per game. This is coming off of a season last year in which they had one of the best offenses in the league. The Tage Thompson injury is obviously incredibly unfortunate and just unlucky for the Buffalo Sabres and isn't going to help their cause. I think maybe most of us got a little bit too ahead of ourselves when kind of projecting what the Buffalo Sabres were going to look like this season. I mean, I definitely did. I had them making the playoffs in a divisional seed, and they're obviously not completely out of the playoff race by any means, but again, in a very tough Atlantic Division, getting off to a slow start could be what makes or breaks your season. The Boston Bruins are up next. They're actually on a 2-game losing streak in regulation, proving that they are indeed human, but they still currently sit atop the Atlantic Division with a record of 14-3-3. As a whole on the season, special teams have been great. Offensively, they've been good. Defensively, they've been good. Obviously, they have one of the best goaltending tandems in the league, maybe the best with Ullmark and Swayman. The Bruins just continue to amaze me. Every time I think they're going to fall off, they just never do. Moving along now, next up we have the Arizona Coyotes, who are currently 9-9-2, 6th place in the Central Division, but just a couple of points out of a wildcard spot. They've been a very competitive team this season. Connor Ingram has given them strong goaltending. The special teams have been really good. They're getting decent production up and down the lineup. There's 9 guys on the roster with double digits or more in points. To think that the Coyotes are already this competitive with the amount of young talent on the roster, the amount of solid prospects they have in the pool, and the amount of draft picks that they have stockpiled, I think it's pretty scary to think about how good this team could be 3 to 5 years from now. And now finally finishing out the video with the Anaheim Ducks, who come into this having lost 6 straight. They are 9-12 on the season, 6th place in the Pacific, so they've obviously came back down to earth after going on that incredible run that they went on. Seemed like they were coming back and winning late in the third period night after night. I think we all knew that wasn't going to be sustainable, but still as a whole, so much positives to take away from the Ducks' first quarter of the season. Mason McTavish looks like a legit superstar. He leads the team with 21 points in 21 games. Pavel Mintyukov is very much in contention for the Calder Trophy at this point. Their plan with Leo Carlsson has worked good so far, as much as some Ducks fans don't like it because you want to see him in the lineup every night. When he has been playing, he's been really good. Similar to what I just said about the Coyotes, I think the same goes for Anaheim. It's pretty scary to think about how much potential this roster has and how good they could be, 3 to 5 years from now. So that is going to wrap up today's video. Those are my thoughts on all 32 NHL teams at around the quarter mark of the season. Like I mentioned at the beginning, if this is something that you guys want to see me do again around the halfway mark and then towards the end of the season, leave a like on this video. Let me know down below in the comments that you enjoyed. And most importantly, if this was your first time checking out the channel and you want NHL content just like this all year round, hit that subscribe button and I'll talk to you all again soon.